The time is now for the Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I am in my 8th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I am joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. We are through opening night in college basketball, and we've got to fix this. Too many games at once, impossible to follow.
Yeah, it was like the same amount of games as a Saturday slate in the middle of January, except they all tipped off at the same time.
Yeah, we've got to bring back the 24-hour hoops marathon. Then we'll have constant basketball going on, and we can get a little bit more exposure to some of these teams. I know the Field of 68 tried to do something with that tournament in South Dakota, but we need more of that because everyone was just pretty much focused on Monday Night Football until that Baylor-Gonzaga game tipped off.
Yeah, that was way too much at one time. But our college basketball bets are off to a great 24-12 start as we are recording heading into Thursday night. But let's jump into our first segment here. And we've got the free bet of the week, which is 12-5-1 on podcast sides and totals dating back to last year. But what are you going with this week, Tan?
I am going to take the Panthers plus 6.5 in Germany over the Giants, and that's good to plus 6. I would not play this at plus 5.5. I'm not really sure where this market's going to be because we haven't sent this out to clients. We might end up doing it at our Friday morning release a couple hours before this podcast comes out. But I've been encouraged by what Bryce Young has been doing. He's certainly been pushing the ball downfield more than Andy Dalton with a higher deep ball rate and a higher air yards per attempt. And that's going to be important in this game in Germany against the Giants defense, allowing a league-high 76% completion rate on passes with at least 20 air yards.
Yeah, we know he's going to need time to throw the deep ball, but I'm not really sure if he's going to have that this week.
Well, the Panthers, the good news is that Taylor Moton is going to shut down Azeez Ojulari, who's been solid filling in for Kayvon Thibodeau, because Moton has been one of the best tackles in the NFL this season. The problem for the Panthers is they might be without Ike Ekwonu. He was out last game. He might not be able to suit up, and that would mean Brady Christensen playing out of position at left tackle, and then Cade Mays stepping in at center, and you've got Brian Burns out there. You got Dexter Lawrence in the middle. But I'm not as worried about Dexter Lawrence because the Panthers have two massive guards in there, in Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis, to help backup center Cade Mays against Dexter Lawrence. I think the Giants pass rush will get theirs, but I don't think it's going to be a disaster. I think Bryce Young will certainly have enough time on some dropbacks to go deep and exploit this Giants secondary.
Yeah, it sounds like Carolina's going to need the ground game to really take over. Otherwise, this pass rush is going to disrupt this game a lot. But the Giants are surrendering a league high 5.2 yards per carry, so the door is open there. But shifting over to the Giants offense, what are you expecting from them in this matchup? I know Darius Slayton is questionable with concussion. Does that mean it's going to be a big-time Malik Neighbors spot?
Well, the Darius Slayton concussion is crucial here because the Panthers defense has one shutdown quarterback, and the Giants have one capable NFL receiver in Malik Neighbors. And I think J.C. Horn, 5th in yards per cover snap allowed, has been an extreme bright spot on Carolina's defense this year, and he's likely to shadow Malik Neighbors for much of this game and shut him down. That spells trouble for Daniel Jones in this passing offense. So I'm looking at this. I'm like, this line would maybe make sense if the Giants were at home, but I just don't see a world that New York is 6.5 points better than any team on a neutral field here. The market has Carolina's defense 3 points worse than every other defense in the NFL. They've been that to this point, but I don't think that's going to be the case going forward because they got back edge defender Jadeveon Clowney last week. They got back linebacker Josie Jewell last week, and now it looks like they're going to be getting back safety Jordan Fuller and edge rusher DJ Wanham this week in Germany. So I think the Panthers defense is the worst in the league, but not 3 points worse than every other defense. I don't know how you can get to this number. We've certainly seen the Giants take a ton of money, and there's been plenty of appetite to fade Bryce Young throughout, pretty much his whole career. But our model favors the Giants by 4.3, and I feel like that's pretty close to the true price here. I just cannot get to the 6.5 that we're seeing here in the market.
Yeah, it feels like a crazy line. But let's look at the trade deadline here. And we've seen a lot of moves. And the Lions went out and made a move to replace that hole that was left from Aiden Hutchinson's injury. And they brought in Zadarius Smith. Do you think he's going to be able to make a big impact here?
Well, I do think he's an upgrade over the pass rushers that Detroit had. guys, but I think Zadarius Smith's best football is behind him. He's only got a 13% pressure rate this season. That's the lowest it's been for him in the last 3 years. He's certainly getting up there in age for an edge defender. Detroit's defense only has a 4.6% sack rate in the last 3 games. So, the defense looked good last week, but I think it was mostly just the weather and Jordan Love's injury. I'm not sure this Lions defense is as good as they've shown without Aiden Hutchinson. I'm skeptical of that. I think CJ Stroud certainly could find some answers against this Lions defense on Sunday night. And Aiden Hutchinson's not getting into the facility until Friday, Zadarius Smith is not getting into the facility until Friday to fill in for Aiden Hutchinson. And I'm like, well, is he even how many snaps is he going to get for the Lions in this debut game here? So if there's no Zadarius Smith or he takes 5 to 10 pass rushing reps on Sunday night, I'm not super worried about him improving Detroit's defense. But going forward, I think it was a necessary move for the Lions, right? I mean, they've got Super Bowl aspirations and they've got no pass rush. So you need a pass rush in the playoffs, and this is certainly a move towards that.
All right, well, looking at the Commanders, their secondary has been an absolute joke this year, but they went out and made a really good move for Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, smart move. The Commanders are playing the 6th highest cover 1 rate in the NFL with terrible cornerbacks. I mean, the Emmanuel Forbes bust is killing them, right? And so they did need to make a move here. I mean, they've certainly got playoff aspirations of their own. Marshawn Lattimore is a great cover 1 cornerback. He's worth 0.7 points per game, about 2% in win probability by our metrics. And those, type of things on the margins for the price they paid is certainly worthwhile. There's a small chance that he plays this week. It doesn't look like he's going to suit up for the Commanders in this game on Sunday, but overall, I think it was a smart trade for Washington here to improve the secondary.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment here. We've got stock up, stock down, and whose stock are you buying right now?
I'm buying the DeAndre Hopkins resurgence here in Kansas City. I mean, they averaged 0.14 EPA per play last Monday night, despite the wet conditions. And Hopkins, 9.6 yards per target in that game against the Buccaneers. Now, you look forward to this game. Hopkins, if he lines up on the outside, certainly going to be shut down by Pat Surtain, conceding a league low 0.48 yards per cover snap. But what I noticed last week that was not happening as much in Hopkins' first game with the Chiefs is he's kind of stepping into that Rashee Rice role inside. And Hopkins has been much more effective in the slot here later in his career. We wanted to see the Titans do that. We were talking about that in the offseason, right? And they never moved him inside. Now the Chiefs are moving him inside, kind of like we saw the late career surgence from Larry Fitzgerald, right? You move a big body receiver inside, he can make things happen. Hopkins caught 6 of his 7 targets for 70 yards on in-breaking routes against the Buccaneers. And I think that Mahomes is going to have to feature Hopkins on the inside this week because, like we said, he'll be shut down on the outside when lined up across from Surtain. And Travis Kelce not going to have a good game here because Denver's defense is allowing the 2nd lowest EPA per target to opposing tight ends.
Do you think the Chiefs' offensive line is going to be able to hold up against this Broncos pass rush, though? I mean, they're 3rd highest in sack rate right now.
Yeah, the Broncos, very creative pressure scheme this year. They talked about actually in the offseason how they used Amazon's AI model. If you ever watch a Thursday night game with the Next Gen broadcast there, you can see they highlight players likely to blitz, and the Broncos implemented some of that stuff that they were noticing to create a pressure scheme this year that is clearly working. Jonathan Cooper, edge rusher, they gave him a new contract. He's 31 pressures this year. And Zach Allen on the interior has a league high 44 pressures. But those two guys are going to be lined up mostly across from the Chiefs' top tackle in Jawan Taylor and top interior lineman in Joe Thuney, who leads the NFL in pass blocking efficiency. So I think the Chiefs' offensive line should be able to hold up enough for Mahomes to get those in-breaking routes out to DeAndre Hopkins here.
All right, well, let's look at whose stock you're going to be selling this week.
I'm selling Pittsburgh's defense. I think they're vastly overrated by the betting markets due to the opposing strength of schedule they've faced. I mean, the Steelers are up to top 3 defense, which we know this defense, right? This defense is rated 8th in market. They've been this way the last 3-4 years, right? It's the same guys. It's the same coach. This is the 8th best defense. And now the market's getting all excited. They're like, oh, look at what Pittsburgh's been doing. They're all of a sudden a top 3 defense, which is just not the case. The Steelers have only gone against one offense with an early down success rate above the league average of 42%. That offense was the Falcons, the opening game of the season, when Kirk Cousins couldn't move. He was coming off that Achilles. He couldn't take a snap under center. They also went against Justin Herbert. That was another, the only other above average quarterback they played, but that was the game Herbert was coming off the ankle sprain, and he was without both starting tackles. So Jaden Daniels, 3rd in yards per pass play this year. He'll be by far the best quarterback Pittsburgh's defense has played to date this season.
All right, well, let's shift it over to the injury watch here. And the Cowboys season might officially be over, but what can we expect from Cooper Rush moving forward?
Well, I mean, people, think back, Rush has actually played some primetime games, so people are pretty familiar with him, and they'll realize, the Cowboys offense has been functional with Cooper Rush when he's come in. So I just want to look at stats prior to this season, because I think we can agree Cowboys supporting cast has been much better in years past than it is this season. Cooper Rush, a positive EPA per play. That's good for a backup quarterback. 0.02 EPA per play in his career prior to this season. But you compare that to what Dak was doing with the same offenses, 0.16 EPA per play. So Dak 0.14 EPA per play better than Rush. Now, Dak is 0.02 EPA per play this year. That's what Rush has been. But, Rush is likely being much worse without the same supporting cast. That's why Dak has been worse. And with CeeDee Lamb banged up. So I think Rush probably going to be in that negative 0.1 EPA per play here. And, I mentioned CeeDee Lamb banged up, but that's been a big part of what Cooper Rush has done successfully, right? In 5 games in 2022, Cooper Rush looked at CeeDee Lamb for 41% of the first read targets. So he's certainly happy that Lamb is practicing, but we'll see if he's close to 100% or not. And then I wanted to mention before we went on to the next game that it's rinse and repeat here with the Dallas defense, right? We've been monitoring Micah Parsons and Deron Bland for the last few weeks. They haven't suited up, but it looks like they might make their debuts this week, and that would certainly be huge because the Dallas defense has really struggled this year without those 2 guys. Those are 2 all-pros. I mean, you slot in 2 all-pros to this Mike Zimmer defense, I think a lot changes. So we got to keep an eye on those 2.
All right, well, looking at the Jets, they got a win last week, but now their interior offensive line is in shambles.
Yeah, shambles. I mean, guards John Simpson and Jake Hansen both exited last game. They were already without guard Xavier Newman and guard Elijah Vera Tucker, who was 6th in pass blocking efficiency. Okay, so now I've mentioned 4 guards out. So they bring in their 5th and 6th string guards. They didn't have a 6th string guard. Their 5th string guard was Max Mitchell, and they had to move rookie Olufashanu, a tackle, over to guard because they didn't have a 6th string guy. And Olufashanu has never played guard in his entire career. And Simpson, Hansen, Newman, Vera Tucker are not practicing. So it might be Mitchell and Fashanu again there on Sunday. New York's offensive line allowed just 10 pressures last week, but 9 of them, the interior was responsible. So we're certainly going to have to look at LJ Collier on Arizona's interior offensive line there to take advantage of this guard disaster by the Jets.
Yeah, well, there is good news here for the Jets, and that's that they're going to have both starting safeties back in uniform after Tony Adams and Ashton Davis were sidelined 2 weeks ago in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and those 2 guys are going to be crucial. I saw them back at practice there this week because Cardinals' best receiver there is tight end Trey McBride. You want the safeties in the game to limit him. He's 4th in EPA per target this season.
All right, well, looking at that Texans and Lions game, I mean, this is probably the best one on the slate, but I'm starting to get a little worried here that Nico Collins is not going to be out there.
Yeah. So Collins leads the NFL, averaging 0.86 EPA per target, and he passed all the tests for his hamstring. There was no setbacks. He regained speed, mobility. He's ready to go, according to the Texans beat reporters. But for some reason, the Texans haven't made a determination on his game status. Now, by the time you listen to this podcast, we might know Nico in, Nico out. But when we're recording this on Thursday morning, it's an extremely confusing situation for me. It's a concerning situation because we made the Texans a best bet on Monday morning when it seemed clear that Collins was going to play. Now, with his status in doubt, I would not have made the Texans a best bet at +3.5. So certainly something that I'm monitoring here. Now, we did account for the Texans defense likely being without edge defender Will Anderson. I still think the Texans are going to be able to rattle Jared Goff in this game because Danielle Hunter, 6th in pressures this season, will be lined up across from left tackle Taylor Decker, who ranks 5th worst in pass blocking efficiency. Will Anderson would have been across from Penei Sewell, so I don't think he would have been much of a factor on a bum ankle anyways on Sunday night.
Well, are you expecting much from Jameson Williams coming off this suspension?
That one, I mean, we talked about how he's taken away some of the deep threat from the Lions offense. We bet the Lions team total under last week in part because of Jameson Williams' suspension. He's back now, but he's going against Derek Stingley, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. So I'm not thinking that Jameson Williams is going to hit deep shots in this game.
Looking at the Bears here, it feels like they are down bad morally, but also physically now with their offensive line banged up.
Yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams is up to almost a 10% sack rate, and we know he's been holding on to the ball really long. He did that at USC, but some people are blaming Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator there. Regardless, it doesn't look like the sack rate's going to get any better on Sunday because the Bears looks like they're going to be without starting left tackle Braxton Jones, starting right tackle Darnell Wright, and backup Kieran Amadouze. And the Patriots, Keon White has been the star of that defense this year. He's up to 30 pressures this season. He's certainly going to wreak havoc across from 4th and 5th string tackles. Jones, Wright, and Amadouze are worth 2.2 points according to our metrics.
Yeah, and it's also not a good matchup for Caleb as he struggled relatively against man coverage compared to zone coverage this season, and the Patriots run the 3rd highest man coverage rate in the NFL. But shifting over to the Colts offense, they were absolutely horrible. Flacco under center last Sunday night, and they ended that game without 3 starting offensive linemen, and that was going against that Brian Flores blitzing scheme, which was not good.
Not good, not good. They bench Anthony Richardson and come out with a negative 0.33 EPA per play. But I do think you're right to point out that it had something to do with the offensive linemen. Against, if you're down 3 offensive linemen, and you're trying to pick up those Brian Flores blitzes, it's just simply not going to work. It does look like they're going to get starting left tackle Bernard Raymond back, but Will Freeze, Ryan Kelly probably still out this week. I think Joe Flacco can turn it around though, because there's not going to be as many blitzes, right? The Bills pretty much just pin their ears back with the standard pass rush at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. And so I think they'll be able to scheme up and control Buffalo's defensive line here. And then Indianapolis is averaging 21% more yards per pass play versus zone than man this season. That's 5th best relatively in the NFL. And the Bills run the 4th most zone coverage in the league. So I'm looking for a little bit of a bounce back from Joe Flacco this week. And if he doesn't, I mean, they might have to go back to Anthony Richardson. Why we talked about last week. It's crazy that they made the move anyways and to not develop him. And Flacco is certainly not rewarding that choice.
Yeah, I was going to say, if only they had a young quarterback that could maybe run, have some legs to get away from the blitz last week, but would be crazy. But we also need to note that Trevor Lawrence is questionable with a shoulder injury, so we need to keep an eye on his status, but we don't really know too much right now. And looking at the 49ers, they might finally be getting back CMC, and we know that Kyle Shanahan is not scared to throw players right into the fire coming back from injury.
Yeah, and the 49ers, 2nd in yards per play this season without Christian McCaffrey. And now, I mean, this offense could get back close to what they were at last season. The reason I say that is because Juwan Jennings is having a great year when he's on the field. His EPA per target was comparable to Brandon Ayuk's last year. Do I think Juwan Jennings is as good as Brandon Ayuk? No. But I don't think that it's a massive drop-off, and we know this 49ers offense was virtually unstoppable last year when everyone was on the field. Now it's everyone but Brandon Ayuk, so I think they're slightly worse than completely unstoppable, which is still good enough for top 3 in the NFL. And I think that Chris McCaffrey, if he's able to go here, he's got a very favorable matchup because the Buccaneers are allowing 4.9 yards per rush this season. That's 29th in the NFL.
All right, well, we've got more on this game with our DraftKings player of the slate. So what are you going with this week, Tan?
I'm going to take George Kittle at $5,800. So Tampa Bay's defense is surrendering a 64% success rate to opposing tight ends this year, 30th in the league. And Kittle is leading tight ends at 0.5 EPA per target. I think he's going to be a major part of the game plan that Kyle Shanahan will be drawing up to beat the Buccaneers cover 3, and the 49ers are averaging 26 more yards per pass play versus cover 3 than other coverages. We know Kyle Shanahan has excelled against that coverage his entire career, and I think he's going to be drawing up a ton of passes to George Kittle this week.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our weather of the week segment, and what are you seeing out there?
Could be a little bit wet for Steelers Commanders on Sunday. Scoring conditions close to 4 points worse than average by our numbers as we sit here on Thursday. That would favor Washington's offense because their ground game is 4 points better than average according to our metrics. That's best in the NFL. And I kind of like the matchup for Washington in the trenches on the other side of the ball. I expect their pass rush to get home this week. Steelers backup right guard Mason McCormick is going to have to go against Daron Payne, who ranks 13th in pass rushing efficiency among interior defenders. And then Commanders edge defender Dorrance Armstrong, 11th in pass rushing efficiency, is going to wreak havoc across from Broderick Jones, who surrendered a league high 7 sacks. So I think it's going to be collapsing pockets for Russell Wilson. Not going to have his checkdowns, though. Once those pockets are collapsing, because Washington's defense is allowing negative 0.34 EPA per target to opposing running backs. That's 3rd in the NFL.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our prime time preview. We've got the LA Rams versus the Miami Dolphins, and you actually have a free lean on the website on over 50 points.
Yep. So Miami's offense was a train wreck, right? Without Tua. They were 31st in EPA per play without Tua. They've been 14th in EPA per play with Tua. So I don't want to think everyone to think this offense is completely back to what they were last year when they were 4th in EPA per play, because they haven't really been able to get Tyreek Hill going. He's averaging 2 yards per route run fewer than he was last year. Now, Jalen Waddle has had an efficient year. He's 7th in EPA per target despite playing a ton of games with the backup quarterbacks, but this might not be the game for Miami's receivers to turn it around here.
So if this isn't going to be a Hill and Waddle game, how are they going to move the ball?
Well, I think the emergence of Jonnu Smith is key here. He's up to 2nd in success rate among tight ends, and the Rams are surrendering a league-high 67% success rate to opposing tight ends. And then Devon Achane is 2nd in EPA per target among running backs, and I think the screen game is going to be clicking because the Rams defense is also surrendering a league-high 66% receiving success rate to opposing running backs. So the Rams have been terrible against tight ends and running backs this year, and I think Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane will be able to exploit that.
Well, you took Jared Verse to win Defensive Rookie of the Year at 9-1 on our NFC West preview podcast, and his 39 pressures are the most for a rookie through 9 games in the last 5 years. So do you think he's going to make a big impact in this one?
Well, I certainly like the value that we have on that now, but I don't think he's going to have a big game here on Monday night because he's going to be mostly lined up across from left tackle Teron Armstead, clearly the best guy on Miami's offensive line, and he ranks 3rd in pass blocking efficiency.
All right, well, shifting over to the Rams offense, how do they match up against this Miami defense?
Well, Miami's defense kind of surprisingly leads the NFL in pressure rate this year, and it's not been that fluky. I certainly don't expect them to lead the NFL in pressure rate going forward, but they're 9th in pass rush win rate, which I think would have surprised a lot of people when they lost Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, right? It's been pretty surprising what they've been able to do with the new defensive coordinator in there. And the Rams are going to be without starting right tackle Rob Havenstein this week. He's 20th in pass block efficiency and a major drop-off to backup Warren McClendon, who surrendered an 11% pressure rate when you remember he filled in at left tackle earlier this year for Alaric Jackson. I also think Miami's defense has a pretty good matchup here in terms of being able to stop the Rams' motion, because Miami themselves motions a ton. The Dolphins defense sees this all the time in practice, and they are one of the few defenses in the league to allow less yards per pass play against motion than when teams don't motion. So I think they'll be able to pick that up when the Rams do, their league high 78% motion rate on Monday night.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see these elite receivers versus elite cornerbacks. I mean, this is going to be a great matchup between them.
Yep. And I expect to mostly see Jalen Ramsey across from Cooper Kupp, who's 11th in yards per route run here. I think Ramsey might follow Kupp into the slot. We've certainly seen Ramsey play inside a fair amount this year, and that would mean Puka Nacua is going to be across from Kendall Fuller, who is 4th in yards per cover snap allowed this season. We talked about how he was the only bright spot on that Commanders defense last year, and he's certainly living up to the expectations the Dolphins had for him this season. So those are two really good cornerbacks for Kupp and Puka to be going across here. And I kind of think that Stafford's going to have to be looking elsewhere. It could be a DeMarcus Robinson, could be a Colby Parkinson game for the Rams. So we got the Rams. Think that they should be favored by about 1.5 here. The total seems a little bit short to me, like you mentioned earlier. I'd make it 51. I think it's probably going to close closer to 51 than where it is at 50 as we sit here on Thursday.
You are up to 20-9 on your free primetime props, but what are you going with this week, Tan?
I'm going to do Devon Achane over 39.5 receiving yards. So he's gone over this prop in all 4 of Tua's starts this season. And the Rams defense has been sneaky really good against wide receivers, only allowing a 45% success rate. They've been even better since Darius Williams debuted for the team at the beginning of October. However, the Rams have been awful, surrendering a league-high 66% receiving success rate to opposing running backs. I certainly think Mike McDaniel will identify that weakness, dial up a ton of screens to Devon Achane, who is 2nd in EPA per target among running backs.
I love it. Well, college basketball is off to a great start so far. So if you're interested in signing up for the service, just head over to drpopsports.com, where we also have our free football analysis. And if you're looking to get the best lines on our free plays, make sure you are subscribing to the pod and watching when we release at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fridays. I know we moved that bet from 12-1 to 6-1 on our free college basketball play last week, but thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back next Friday to preview week 11 of the NFL.